Today's lesson will be a fun poetry wrap-up of the unit that we've been dealing with. So first, the bell ringer. Answer this in your notebook. Make sure to answer the entire question. So is music poetry and are all songs poems? And make sure you explain your answer. You will have 1 minute on the timer. Hopefully you realize that most songs with lyrics, of course, are poems. However, some are definitely better than others. So today we're going to have a brief review of the terms that we've already discussed, and then we are going to analyze song lyrics as poetry, looking for those poetic elements. So first, our review. This should already be in your notes. We talked about several different sound devices, and we've had examples in our textbook. The first sound device is repetition. Of course, you know, repetition is any time you use a sound, word, or a whole line more than once in the poem. For example, we read, "Beware, do not read this poem," and the line "back off from this poem" was repeated a few times throughout. The next one is alliteration. We mentioned that often tongue twisters are alliteration because it's the consonant at the beginning of the word that is repeated, such as circle slowly with a silken swish. The S is repeated at the beginning of those words. Assonance is when we have a vowel sound in a word that doesn't rhyme but still has that same vowel. For example, we have deep-eyed deer in the poem Pretty Words. And consonants. We have the consonant sound again, but it's in the middle or the end of the word. For example, nest, watered, and shoot, the T there. We've also gone over different types of figurative language. The first one you are all very familiar with, simile. That's comparing two things using like and as. The example from our textbook, "My heart is like a singing bird." The next example, of course, then, is metaphor, comparing two things not using like or as. Poets make pets of pretty docile words. Again, you can point out here as well that there's alliteration with the P's. Personification is the fun one, where we give things that are not people, person traits, such as "it has taken in many victims," meaning the poem has taken them in, eaten them. Okay? We've also mentioned that flowers dance in the wind, for example. Flowers don't actually dance, so that's personification. The next is hyperbole. I hear you saying this all the time. "I have a ton of homework." You don't literally have a ton of homework. You wouldn't be able to carry it home. The example from our textbook is "the hunger of this poem is legendary," meaning it's very impressive. Okay, so now let's look at a few lines that you probably will recognize from songs. The first one, "My heart's a stereo." I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that song and hopefully notice that it is a metaphor. The next one, "Shine like gold, buzz like a bee." You could actually say two things here. The obvious one is that it's a simile. He uses like twice, but you could also point out the alliteration in buzz like a bee, and some of you may also point out the onomatopoeia in buzz. "I'd catch a grenade for you." Would you really? It's hyperbole. It's an exaggeration. The next one is probably a little before your time, but this is a song I remember my parents listening to when I was a kid, so it was the first one that came to my mind. "Hello darkness, my old friend, I've come to talk with you again." Even though you might not recognize the Simon and Garfunkel song, hopefully you're able to find the personification. And finally, "We Didn't Start the Fire" by Billy Joel. I know many of you are familiar with this song. It's often used in history lessons because he makes a lot of allusions in this song. But if we just look at this line, hopefully you're able to point out he's not talking about a literal fire. He's talking about the fire as a symbol for all of the problems in the world. Okay, now let's try one together, the entire song. Remember, these are some of the things that you are looking for. You have all of these in your notes, and we just talked about several of them as well. So here is the first song we are looking at from the Beatles, The Long and Winding Road. I'm going to play the song while you are reading the lyrics, and I will also put up a question. What might the long and winding road symbolize? And find 2 especially effective images. Now that's a personal answer, but explain what each represents. And finally, find at least 2 other examples of figurative language. Hopefully that was enough time for you to answer all those questions. So first, what does the road symbolize? Life, as in most poems. That's the way this poem is as well. Okay? So some examples of the figurative language that I've put together. First of all, we'll start easy with rhyme. There's a rhyme scheme, A, B, pretty much for the first stanza. Repetition, the long and winding road repeats in line 1 and again in line 11. There are several examples of personification. It always leads me here, line 4. They still they lead me back, line 11. And the wild and windy night, the rain washed away, has left a pool of tears crying for the day, lines 6 and 7. Alliteration, wild and windy night, the rain has washed away. And hyperbole, pool of tears in line 7. To have a pool of tears would be an awful lot of tears. Okay. Here's an example of a song that you are going to be analyzing yourself. I'm going to play the song while you look for any poetic elements you can find, whether it be similes, metaphors, repetition and rhyme are fine as well. Those are the easy ones to find. So let me play this while you work. Find several different examples. Here I have a few labeled for you. The first thing is a metaphor. It's hard to see on the projector here, but a fork stuck in the road is a metaphor for a choice that you are making. The second line, time grabs you by the wrist. You could say that's imagery meaning a watch, or it could mean that time is grabbing you. So again, personification is how I have it here. Internal rhyme with best and test. And lesson learned, the L's repeat, so you have alliteration. I also pointed out tattoos of memories. You can get a really good image in your mind of someone having a tattoo, so that would be imagery. And you can hopefully find a few others on your own, obviously the repetition here at the end. So that concludes our lesson. Hopefully you were able to have a nice review of all of the terms. Hand in your worksheet so I see how much of this you've labeled on your own.